Welcome to the Experts in Sport podcast, brought to you by the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences at Loughborough University. So today, I'm with Dr. Clare Holley and Dr. Lucy Porter, and later on we'll be joined by Dan Parker. Dr. Clare Holley is a senior lecturer in psychology here at Loughborough, specialising in promoting healthy eating in childhood. She is co-founder of the new app VegStars, which supports parents to help their children eat more vegetables. Dr. Lucy Porter is a postdoctoral research associate here at Loughborough, and also works as a behavioural and social scientist for public health in government. Her work focuses on behaviour change to support people to live healthier lives more easily, and her main area of expertise is healthy eating for families. Later, we'll be joined by Dan Parker. He has worked in marketing and advertising for 25 years for many of the world's largest food brands. As Chief Executive of VegPower, he now uses that experience to tackle his toughest challenge, to encourage kids to eat more vegetables. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
We're all here and ready to go. So let's get started straight into it with talking about the 3 R's. So can you tell me what the 3 R's are?
Absolutely. So the 3 R's are 3 methods which our research tells us are useful for parents to use to encourage their children to eat more vegetables. And those are role modelling, reoffering and rewarding. So what do these things mean? Role modelling is the action of eating something you'd like your child to eat in front of them and doing it enthusiastically. So trying, say, a piece of pepper and saying, oh, this is really nice and juicy. I really like this. Reoffering is simply the action of giving your child a food which they have been offered before on a different occasion. So not straight one after the other, but on another day, at another opportunity. And saying, would you like to try some of this pepper? So making sure they know that that's available to them, pointing it out to them. And then rewarding. So this is the idea that if you offer a child a small reward in exchange for trying a vegetable, that they will potentially be more likely to try it, more enthusiastic about trying it. So rewards can be things like a sticker or a fun game to play or a trip to the park, whatever that child might really enjoy doing.
Okay, so it's good to know what the 3 R's are, and we're talking about this in the context of trying to get children to eat more vegetables.
Yeah.
So why is this a really important area of research?
Well, we know that on average, children and adults alike eat far fewer fruits and veg than they are meant to, according to what gives us a good, healthy, balanced diet. Vegetables are particularly important for micronutrients for health. So we know that lower consumption of vegetables is associated with things like increased risk of cardiovascular and metabolic diseases, increased risk of cancers and other health conditions. And we know that the best way to have healthy eating behaviour among adults is to try and get that eating behaviour established really nice and early in life. So during early childhood, we have what we'd call a window of opportunity to work with parents, work with children and get them to try vegetables, which will hopefully get them to like vegetables, and then they will eat them happily. And we know that those eating behaviours track through from early childhood, throughout childhood, across adolescence and into adulthood, if we can get them established nice and early.
So we're quite clear then on quite a few of the benefits around eating veg, so why we're doing this research. And I know you've got a number of research papers that have moved forward into your current kind of development of trying to develop an app. And we're going to talk through your research and we're going to talk through the future development of the app. So can you let us know about the beginning of your research? So I know you've looked at some parent-led home-based interventions that are there to increase children's acceptance of disliked veg. So can you tell me what you did in this research and kind of the findings?
Absolutely. So we started off by reviewing lots of the literature that's out there, all of the scientific research that's been done before, kind of across childhood, when people wanted to try and get children to eat more vegetables, what did they try and how did it go? And we could see very quickly that one of the things that looks like it's a very helpful thing to do is this idea of reoffering a food to a child that they don't eat. And vegetables are exactly the same as any other food in that respect. Vegetables are more challenging to get children to eat because they don't have some of the qualities that make them something which people learn to like really easily. So, for example, they are not energy dense. If you have an energy dense food that's, say, high in fat and sugar and those sorts of things, our brains tell us to like them very, very quickly, and we like those foods easily. Things like vegetables often don't have those sweet flavours. They don't contain a large number of calories, which means it takes our bodies a little bit longer to learn that they're a useful thing for us to eat. And we also know that there are some potential evolutionary reasons why children in particular don't like vegetables. So we see that children go through these fussy phases early on in childhood, which tend to peak between sort of 2 and 6 years of age. And one of the things that happens during that phase is they begin to reject any food which is either new or looks new, perhaps looks different, it's a different shape, a different colour to what they've had before. And one of the reasons for this is that children need to go through a phase whereby when they're able to access foods on their own, so they stop being a baby who is immobile and they're able to access foods on their own, they could potentially poison themselves if they were to just readily eat anything they could get their hands on. So instead, they have to go through this process of relearning that foods are safe to consume. And one of the things which may indicate whether or not a food is safe to consume is this bitter flavour that some foods have. So for instance, green vegetables like sprouts, cabbage, broccoli often have this slight bitterness to them. And it's thought that this bitter flavour might signal that this food could potentially be poisonous out, in the natural environment. So children find these particularly difficult to learn to like, and therefore we need to do things to overcome this challenge. So we know that reoffering a vegetable to a child a large number of times can get that child to begin to learn to taste that food, then to learn to like the food and to eat the food. But the problem is just saying to someone every day, do you want to try some broccoli? Funnily enough, doesn't tend to make children particularly enthusiastic about doing it. I mean, if someone once a day came to me and said, Claire, do you want to try some Brussels sprouts? I'd probably just say no, quite firmly by the third or fourth time.
I mean, people have been trying that on me for years at Christmas and it's still not working.
Exactly. So the point of our research was to start to think about what things we could put in place in combination with reoffering that might help to make children enthusiastic about trying vegetables, or at least happy to, The absolute last thing we want is children to be in a situation where they feel pressured or put off trying vegetables. So we knew we needed to try things that would make children happy to try them in that moment. And if not, no big loss, we can try again another day. So 2 of the different methods that we wanted to look at in particular were the effects of role modelling. So when a parent or a caregiver eats that vegetable in front of their child, whether or not that might help the child be willing to try it. Particularly if we think about this angle of learned safety, we know that it's safe to eat because look, there's someone that I trust is eating that food in front of me. And also it can't be that bad because they're smiling and they're saying they like it and they're eating it themselves. So we wanted to look at the effects of role modelling. And we also thought that rewards might be a helpful thing to try out as well. So if we offer children something that we know that they like a shiny sticker that they can stick on the wall or stick on their jumper or in a book or wherever they want, is that enough to just nudge them in the right direction to say, yeah, okay, I will try it on this occasion? And just to be clear, this is always about trying. So certainly not about getting children to eat vegetables by saying, if you finish your plate, you can have a sticker or anything like that. The idea is just to motivate them to be willing to taste something. And that action of tasting will mean that they begin to learn to like something over time. So we tried these things out with groups of parents who did different combinations of these 3 things. So what we did was we got parents to offer their child a small piece of a raw vegetable that they didn't like every day for 2 weeks. And they were asked to do this outside of a mealtime, so that it wasn't going to possibly add stress and pressure onto a family mealtime or stop their child from eating their dinner, things that we know parents get really stressed about. And one group just offered the vegetable alone. They just said, would you like to try some pepper? For instance, if pepper was the veg they didn't like. Another group of parents tried the daily offering, but alongside that, the parent was asked to really enthusiastically try a piece of that vegetable in front of their child. So, oh, this pepper's really yummy. Would you like to try some? And then our third group added rewards into the mix as well. So they said to their child every day, would you like to try a piece of pepper? Oh, it tastes really nice. If you try a piece, you can have a sticker. And then what we did was we looked to see, compared to before this 2 weeks of tasting, after the 2 weeks, did the child like the vegetable and did they then eat that vegetable? So we got groups of parents all over Charnwood, Leicestershire, to look and see how this worked with them and their child at home. And these were all parents of 2 to 5 year old children.
And were any of these methods successful in your trials?
The good news is, yes, they were. So we saw that when parents either role modelled, so ate the vegetable in front of their child and re-offered that vegetable alongside the offer of a sticker, or even if they just offered that vegetable to their child in combination with a sticker, those children liked the vegetable significantly more at the end of the intervention, and they ate significantly more of that vegetable. So we started to get this clear picture that actually re-offering can be really effective as long as you've got the right tools in place to support each child to try that vegetable enough times for them to learn to like it.
So obviously I've had a look over your papers and things. So those academics out there who want to kind of dig in more, we can direct them to your papers. But I think your research then evolved into something kind of the next steps. So I think you conduct some research looking at the role of child temperament and child eating behaviours as predictors of the intervention success. Can you tell us more about that? So I think this came from potentially different outcomes from your previous research. So there was some more success in some areas than others. And I think these may be factors that you thought may be contributing to the success of these eating behaviours.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we saw, when I say we, it was me. I was there on the ground with each of these parents and children, which was really good fun. So at the end of the 2 weeks, I would get the child to try the vegetable in front of me, and I could see exactly what their reaction was. One of my biggest research regrets is that I didn't include filming those interactions as part of the process, because some of the kids' reactions were absolutely brilliant. But children's reactions varied hugely. So, for instance, there was a little boy who was involved. His vegetable that he was assigned was celery, which is admittedly a bit of a taller ask than a red pepper, if you ask me. Lots of people don't like celery. And despite trying this celery lots and lots of times, at the end of the study, he still really didn't like it. But he was such a lovely boy who was so keen to please me that he tried desperately to eat it and ended up gagging and spitting it out all over the table.
Brilliant. Never work with kids and animals, isn't that the rule?
I know, it was such a sweet boy. And then by contrast, we had other children who had been absolutely adamant they didn't like a vegetable at the start. The lure of the sticker and their parent being enthusiastic in front of them was enough to get them trying it. And their parents said that by the end of the first week, that child was readily eating pieces of raw pepper. In fact, I bumped into one of the parents of the children who took part in the intervention study about a year ago in the supermarket in town centre, bearing in mind this research took part nearly 9 years ago now. And their child apparently still calls me the veg lady, because they loved the whole process and reacted really well to the methods and would sit and eat what we had measured out as a whole age appropriate portion for that child. So we saw that even though there were these strong group differences where some groups were more effective than others, there was variability in terms of whether or not these methods were effective for different children. So we know that, as is always the way, any kind of public health intervention, you want something that is aimed at the masses, but we know that almost invariably there's no such thing as a one size fits all, right? We need some nuance built in there. So we wanted to try and look and see if we could unpick some factors that might be underlying or driving some of those effects. So one of the things we thought might be quite plausible is child temperament. So this is kind of the early origins of personality, really, in children. And what we found that children were higher in sociability tended to benefit more from these interventions. So this made sense to us because what we're seeing is that this intervention is based around social interactions, right? It's based on the child interacting with their parent or caregiver and seeing the caregiver's reaction partially. So children who are more sociable, those ones who thrive from social interactions with others, who are perhaps more motivated to please people around them, respond better to the intervention. They were more likely to try the vegetable, and therefore they had better increases in consumption by the end of the intervention. We also saw that children who were more emotional, so perhaps children who are more inclined to have strong emotional reactions to upsetting events, ones who are more likely to experience distress, those children didn't respond so well to the intervention. So these more perhaps sensitive children, we might call them, they tended not to benefit so much more from the intervention. And perhaps that's because they were more inclined to experience negative emotional reactions, the kind of inattention between perhaps knowing they might not like the vegetable, weren't as motivated by this kind of sociable aspect to their personality. And the other thing that we saw that affected how successful the intervention were those children's broad responses to food. So although, as I talked about earlier on, we know that children have this fairly reliable change in their reactions to food in early childhood, between the age of 2 and 6 becoming more fussy, children still vary, as do adults, in how much they enjoy food, in how much they experience hunger and fullness, and indeed how fussy they are in general. And this happens kind of across the life course. And what we saw, unsurprisingly, was that children who were in general more fussy were harder nuts to crack, and often the children who didn't see as good a benefit from these interventions. So we thought, okay, we're onto something good here, but we really need to start to understand more about what can influence whether or not this sort of intervention could be successful if we're really going to try and promote this to something for the general public.
There's so many interesting things you've talked about there. I think one of them being that you were, providing raw vegetables, and obviously there's consistency in that, but, that may put many children off anyway, in terms of those tastes and things from my experience. But the fact that I think certainly when I was a kid, to get me to eat veg, they try and hide it in things. And, that just irritated me even more, because I could see it or I could taste it and I'd be like, oh, there's so-and-so in this. No, there isn't. I was like, yes, there is. You could tell. So that would get me my back against the wall. It's interesting what you talk about here as well, because my kids are very different. So I've got 2 kids. We would say one of them is a pleaser. So she'll do kind of, almost whatever you ask her to do. And he's not. But we're very lucky because he is probably more interested in eating vegetables. So even though he's very, very stubborn, he does actually eat vegetables, and that almost encourages her to eat more vegetables. And I think we've ground them down just by consistently putting the vegetables on the plate. And like my daughter at first spent so long removing peppers and onions from whatever, bolognese or anything like that. Now she can't even remember doing that. She thinks she's always liked them. So we've had a bit of success, but on the other side, my son, even though as a baby he loved bananas, he cannot stand a banana, and his sister probably eats 2 of them a day. And he will leave the room because he hates the smell, and he will, really kick off because somebody's eating a banana in his presence. And it's really interesting to battle out between personality types. So I think that research is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's important to say as well that, thinking about your son there and bananas and the example of the little boy that I gave and celery, these are methods that work as a broad brush approach. But what I always say is we're all entitled to dislike something. So as you were saying at the beginning, Martin, no matter how many times you're given Brussels sprouts on Christmas Day, it doesn't mean you're going to like them. And so I think methods like this are really useful in trying to turn the tide on broad food rejection. But we're all entitled to dislike something. There might be one veg which your child is never going to eat, no matter what happens. And the interesting thing is you often see kind of family patterns in that. So it might be perhaps you've got some genetic underpinning to your taste buds that means something tastes really funny to you. So coriander is a good example, that for some people, coriander tastes like soap if you've got a particular taste receptor. If you don't have that taste receptor, it tastes, as far as I'm concerned, it's fantastic stuff. So it's important to just caveat everything we're saying here as, children are still entitled to dislike things, I think.
I think that's a very valid point, and probably brings us to the next part of the research that evolved from this. So we've mentioned there that different children respond in different ways. And, I can empathize with many people trying to get, like say my son to eat a banana. It's very, very difficult. So I know you've done, and I think Lucy, you've conducted a lot of this research on the coalface here of research into the barriers to parents and caregivers for trying the 3 R's approach. So can you tell us a bit more about the research and your findings?
Yeah, definitely. So what we wanted to understand is how this issue of, child temperament, how that actually reflects in parents' experiences. But we also wanted to find out a bit more about, are there other issues? Are there other challenges that families are experiencing when they're trying to get their kids eating more vegetables, or, specifically when they're trying the 3 R's at home? So we put a call out, we spoke to a lot of different parents about their experiences, and we had a look at what they said and found that there were definite themes and patterns in what families are experiencing. And based, reflecting on what Claire's just been saying, child temperament was a big issue for a lot of families. So I know that one mum, she said, with regards to rewarding, she said that if she's tried that before, and when she offers her son a sticker, he'll just say, nope, don't want the sticker, because he doesn't want to eat the vegetables. So that was something that she attributed to him just being very non-responsive to rewards, and therefore said that technique wouldn't work for her. But it's not just about these kind of more stable aspects of children's temperament. Families were also talking about their child's mood in that moment. Sometimes they're being a bit cheeky, playing up. Other times they're in a bad mood, and parents are worried that if they offer vegetables, it's going to lead to a tantrum. And ultimately, this seems to be resulting in parents were generally trying to avoid a scenario where they offer their child a meal, it's got vegetables on the plate, and the child has a tantrum, refuses to eat anything. And obviously that's, a huge concern for families. They want their child to eat their meals, eat a healthy diet, be fed and full and happy. They're making all of these considerations all the time when they're working out whether to continue re-offering vegetables. And what we saw in our data was that these beliefs about what would happen as a result of trying the 3Rs was a really, really key thing for families. So sometimes it was whether families thought whether these 3Rs would actually be effective at all. Sometimes this was based on personal experience, past experience of trying them and saying, oh, well, this didn't work for me. Sometimes it was more of a hypothetical thing. It might not have actually been something that they tried. They just thought about the concept as a whole. No, I don't think that would work. So some of these things that we heard parents talking about, though, we could also hear their perception of what the 3Rs actually are was perhaps not necessarily, it didn't necessarily align with the techniques that we've seen used in the evidence. So, for example, some people would conflate the idea of re-offering their child a vegetable with really pressuring their child to eat the vegetable. Now, of course, we know that the evidence also supports that. It shows that if you pressure children, if you say to them, go on, eat it, go on, just try a bite, we know that's not going to work. We know that could actually backfire. It could result in children being less willing to eat the vegetables. But unfortunately, I think some of the 3Rs, they have a bit of a PR issue. So when people hear re-offering, they think that this means pressuring their children. They think it's, this horrible thing, and they, quite rightly want to avoid doing that. So that can actually turn into one of these barriers to using the 3Rs, where people think, oh no, it's this other thing, and I don't want to do that. Similarly with rewarding as well. Claire mentioned the idea of just giving a small sticker, whereas other people sometimes think that means that you're going to be offering your child a reward for life, which obviously isn't sustainable. And what the 3Rs would actually suggest is, maybe just offer a sticker just at the beginning to get children started on their, veg trying adventure. So these are some of the issues that we were seeing reflected in what parents were saying. None of these, seem particularly insurmountable, and they're all things that we can work with families to help them overcome. But of course, it's not just about perceptions. It's not just about what parents know, what parents think is going to happen. Families were also, quite understandably talking about some of the wider challenges that they have with offering vegetables to their families as a whole. So, for example, the cost of vegetables, and obviously we're experiencing a cost of living crisis at the moment, and we know it's not just the price of the food itself, it's also the amount of energy you might need to use to cook it and things like that. I spoke to another parent who was living in temporary accommodation at the time, and she just did not have the food storage and cooking facilities. There were all these recipes that she really wanted to try. She knew that if she could offer her daughter roast vegetables, she knew her daughter would be much more willing to eat them, but she just did not have access to those facilities. So these are some of the wider issues as well that we need to think about when we're talking to parents, when we're trying to give them advice. We need to make sure that we're being really sensitive to their experiences, the challenges they face, and their needs, so that the advice we give can actually be tailored and pitched to them in a way that they can use it.
I think it's worth just digging back into a couple of those things because, like you said, the PR issues potentially around the 3Rs and the perceptions that we have, I think, is a huge point. And, myself included, I think Claire's explained the role modeling, quite well, and then that's quite clear. But when it comes to the reoffering, can you go into a little bit more detail of what it is and what it isn't? Because, again, in my head, the reoffering could turn into, here's X, go on, eat it, eat it, eat it. And that pressure that I think we might be, victims of our poor parents in the future. So I'm going to blame them that we had those kind of things. And the reward side of things, do this and you'll get a McDonald's is a common thing that's out there. So can you go through just briefly to say, what are the tactics that we should be using with reoffering?
Yeah, absolutely. With reoffering, I think Claire mentioned earlier, it should be this very low pressure thing. So one of the ways we advise to help that be low pressure is take it away from the mealtime. There's normally an expectation there that the child, has to eat a certain amount, they have to eat enough to be full. If you take it away from meal times and say, offer some cucumber as a snack, or perhaps even use it as part of a play activity, then it takes some of that pressure to actually eat it away. And you mentioned that idea of saying, go on, eat it, go on, go on, go on. The idea is to be very relaxed about it. And I know that's really, really difficult. As a parent or a caregiver, this is really important stuff. You really want your child to eat a healthy diet. So it can be hard to put this kind of relaxed, chilled face on. But it is really important to make it a very relaxed environment for children. So there's a big difference to saying, go on, just have one bite, go on, oh, go on, just finish that mouthful, versus if you're saying, oh, hey, do you want to try some cucumber? It's really yummy. No, you don't want to? That's okay. These are very, very different approaches. And it's that more relaxed version. It just takes that pressure away and makes it a slightly less stressful experience for children and also for parents and caregivers. You also mentioned rewards and offering McDonald's. So I just wanted to touch back on that as well. So the research for rewards suggests that actually if you offer a non-food reward, and we keep saying sticker, but it could be something like, an extra trip to the park or an extra bedtime story, some more playtime, a game on the phone, something like that. Ideally, these are the kinds of rewards we want to be offering. When we offer food rewards to children, we're quite often going for something that's a sweet treat, maybe a dessert. And the problem with this is, in comparison, a vegetable compared to, a bar of chocolate, it's not quite as attractive. And there can be that comparison. And it ultimately leads to children disliking the vegetable disliking the vegetable even more and liking the reward itself even more. So using food can unfortunately backfire, even though it might seem effective in the short term.
Thank you. You did answer my next question without me even asking it. So thank you very much around rewards. I think there was one other piece that came out that really stuck with me from reading the research, and it was around constipation. And he's not old enough to watch this, and my little boy a couple of times has had constipation, and just for the level of knowledge that we should have. So my background is PE teaching, it's fitness, it's health. My wife's a pediatric consultant, and therefore we should probably know some stuff. But these things it's happened a couple of times, and actually talking through that with him, and actually us reflecting on what he'd eaten and for various reasons, I think it's been really beneficial. And for him to understand, actually, if I eat more veg, I'm not going to get this pain that I've had. And I'm not suggesting you do, make sure they get pain and then association like that. But I think it's an interesting piece for us and just to reflect upon. And the other bit was within this research, did anything come up around organisation? Because for myself and my wife to reflect on it, was like, well, actually, let's reflect. They've not really had that much veg. Why? We were both busy at work. We weren't planned enough. Actually, grandparents gave them this, and oh dear, So actually, my New Year's resolution, it's on the wall, was to be more prepared with meals, and that's specifically for the kids. So I just wondered, did that come up in terms of being organised and planned meals?
Something that we did see was that when the 3Rs already fit in with things that families were already doing, then they found it easier to put them into practice, quite obviously. So for families who were already eating meal times together, those parents said that they found it much easier to fit role modelling. into their routines, because they're already sitting there around the table, they're already eating it. Maybe they're already having conversations about how the food tastes. So that was something that was much easier for them to just continue and embed in their daily lives. And then some parents as well, they would just say that they weren't in the habit of buying vegetables, they weren't in the habit of eating vegetables themselves. So yeah, I suppose for those families, there's almost a need to sort of take a step backwards and start thinking about the food environment and the vegetable eating that's happening for the family as a whole. And I think as well, this relates to the issue of offering rewards and when rewards do and don't work. So one thing that we noticed was that some families would say, oh, I just can't think of a reward that I could offer them that they're not already getting. So one mum was saying how she already gives her daughter stickers freely, and it's a real source of pleasure for her and joy, sticking these stickers all over the house. I mean, it was a source of pleasure for the daughter, not for the mum to have stickers everywhere. And I think that's a really, really key thing when it comes to rewards as well. It does have to be something extra that the child wouldn't normally have, because it's really, really easy for rewards to accidentally become a punishment if it's something that they're normally getting. But then if they don't try the vegetable on that occasion, if the parent then turns around and says, oh, well, we can't go to the park because you didn't eat that really turns it on its head in a potentially maladaptive or detrimental way. It becomes a punishment rather than a reward. So for rewarding, it seems to be important for it not to be part of your existing routine. But for the other two, it can be really helpful if it is already something families are doing.
Thanks. I mean, it's brilliant to have gone through that kind of process, really, of these 3 research projects. And as you may be aware, Experts in Sport podcast is about bridging the gap between academia and professional practice. So there's loads of tips there in terms of what parents can do based on your research. But I do know that you've also moved this forward, and you're looking at that innovative approach to how this can be applied, and you're in the process of developing an app. So can you guys tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is built on the work that we've done with families already, speaking to them about these challenges they face. And the starting point for us was to take these experiences. And what we've done is we've used this scientific framework. Sorry, chunky words there. It's called the behavior change wheel for any academics or nerds listening. And in really, really simple terms, the great thing about it is you can plug these challenges, these needs, these experiences into one end of it, and you go through the process. And at the end, it tells you what kinds of strategies, techniques you can use to support people to make the behavior change that you're aiming for. So that was our starting point. And once we had this list of things that we wanted to aim to do, then we could go to our local app developers and start creating an app for them, for families.
So with regards to the app, can you just give us a bit more detail on what the app is and what its purpose is?
Yeah, sure. So the app is a tool to help parents to use these 3 different methods that we know can help children to eat more vegetables. So the idea is that they use the app every day over a 2 to 3 week window to transform their child's liking and intake of one disliked vegetable. And it does that by providing parents with the information they need on what the 3 methods are, reassurance over lots of the barriers that Lucy's talked about and that you've also talked about, Martin, that might prevent parents from wanting to use these methods, how to implement them effectively, troubleshooting guides, and it has a daily tracker. So the parent each day will track whether or not they offered the vegetable to their child, whether or not they used either of the other 2 R's. So did they reward, did they role model? They can make notes about what happened, and they can keep a daily record of what happens over that 2 to 3 week window. And it also includes a nice game element for children. So there's an inbuilt sticker chart, which is a star chart, not stickers, a star chart where children can choose the colour of the stars that they collect, and they can see them amass over the 2 to 3 week diary. Or they can play a fun game which has cartoon pictures of vegetables, matching pairs, those sorts of things. But parents are also advised that they can use rewards from outside the app, anything that they feel is appealing to their child and suits their needs. Parents might not want their child playing on a phone, and that's perfectly reasonable. So that's what the app is, and the hope is that we'll be able to implement that with parents and give them this really helpful, easy to use tool in their pocket that they can use as and when they want to.
It sounds really interesting, and that the flexible elements of it is there. So hopefully combining your research, some research around behaviour change and technology, will be out there soon, and people will be able to find out about it shortly.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got a couple more phases to our research development. So first of all, we've got a small study planned to get some parents to try it out for us, check it really is as easy to use as we think it is, and then we'll be moving to trying to do some kind of bigger work to make sure that it's definitely effective, and then it will be widely and freely available.
And I know we're kind of growing more and more partnerships with industry, and Dan has been sat here very patiently. So I know there's some partnership work going on with Dan and VegPower. So Dan, do you want to just introduce us to VegPower? Let us know a little bit about the relationship with Loughborough, and then where we see VegStars app.
So we're a 5-year-old not-for-profit that was set up with the mission to get the UK eating more vegetables, but obviously driven by a public health agenda, and particularly to focus on getting children to eat more vegetables so that they not only create good habits they'll have for life, but good habits they'll share with their children in turn, and actually massively children share their good habits with their parents. So we see children as a way of unlocking a general better attitude towards a healthier diet in every home. We met with the team at Loughborough for the first time about a year ago, and we had a bit of a chance encounter and discovered that we were both trying to do the same thing. And so we come from very different backgrounds. We're first and foremost advertising people. We're very well advised by nutritionists and other scientists, but we are first and foremost communications specialists. And then talking to somebody who's looking at it from an academic angle, we found lots and lots of common ground, and we chucking around ideas, and hopefully we can, by sort of pooling our research and our thinking, we can both achieve more in what we hope to achieve.
Excellent. And I certainly want to mention the Eat Them to Defeat Them campaign, because I was checking out your website, and the kids were they've seen it, I think through Newsround and numerous different things, and I'm going to get them chanting "Eat Them to Defeat Them" around the house. We might have to start that at Loughborough as well. Get everybody on it.
Well, we we exist to fix when it's gone wrong, right? So we're at the next part down the pipeline. We're primarily focused on primary. And just to give a couple of figures, something like about 80% of our children don't eat enough vegetables in order to have all those kind of vitamins and minerals and the things they need for a healthy diet. But perhaps a greater concern is about a third of our kids eat pretty much close to no vegetables at all, right? And that means that actually what we're talking about here is malnutrition, and a really great area of concern about the long-term health and well-being of the child, as well as their ability to function today, to learn, and to be a positive part of the environment in which they exist. We also see within that about 50% of parents say they're struggling to get their kids to eat vegetables. Many have given up and tried but failed. And so we sit to say, well, actually, if you want to know why the work that your team are doing and the app that you're creating is important, is you don't want to be part of that 30 or so percent, because actually we're talking about some fairly serious issues that become progressively harder to resolve as that child grows older. Now, I want to share with you a bit of the insight we have at the next point in the pipeline, and I think this really talks to what you're doing in the 3 R's. Is the model we look at, and because we're advertising people, we like to make things simple, is that for a lot of children, and we're talking 5 and beyond, they see vegetables as part of a currency in the battle of wills between them and their parents, right? Many of them think they're disgusting, and actually, as you touched on earlier on, for some kids, they have a genetic dislike of bitterness, and some vegetables are much more disgusting than they might be for others. But there's a whole perception going on around the place of vegetables. They're kind of like the enemy in the world of food. If then we switch it over to the parents, what we find motivates parents, all parents, is friction, right? That's the thing we don't want when we get, it's Tuesday night, we've had a tough day at work. We don't want stress, we don't want friction. We also don't want food waste. And that's even more pronounced in these times of cost of living crisis. So actually the word we find most interesting with parents and caregivers is risk. And if you look at, and I have one of the major supermarkets said to me, the way that parents shop a supermarket is a continual risk assessment. Will this get eaten? Will it lead to friction? Will it go to waste? Will I be wasting my money? Will it take a lot of time? Will it take a lot of effort? It's a continuous risk assessment, which is quite, it's a weird way to think about food, isn't it, in terms of risk? And so what we have at this moment is this horrible vicious circle of the kids seeing this as a currency and about their wills, the parents and carers seeing this as risk and friction, and that gets us into this horrible mess that we are in with an awful lot of parents. Now, the work you're talking about is about diffusing that before it happens. Right? And quite interesting, what I would say about a lot of these interventions is that they shouldn't be interventions. They should be business as usual. And they also, I'm not a big fan of what I call big dealing, right? So if you're going to, the best reward is a smile, right? And you can come and you can do a reward chart and you can maybe fix something, but you need to reward every day, at every meal, at every experience you have when raising a child, because affirmation from their parents is a thing that children will desire more than anything else. It could be a hug, it could be a kiss, it could be a smile. It's much more valuable than any sticker chart, or certainly any McDonald's. Definitely don't do that, right? The other one that comes to role modeling is there's a subtlety to role modeling. I mean, I think when they're small, you can do, look, daddy's having a broccoli, right? But actually what you should really be doing is making sure you eat with your child, right? Don't just have a piece of broccoli and show yourself. Eat with your child every time your child eats, even if it's just a little tiny plate, because it's teaching culture about eating together and the importance of food and the power of the hearth and coming together and these other things that lie at the heart of good food. I'd also say around role modeling, I say not only is it eating together, but you shouldn't make vegetables an issue, right? So I'm just kind of sitting here, I'm going to eat it because you know what, this is great, and I'm not going to tell you it's great, and I'm not going to mention I'm just eating it because it's good. And that is the most powerful piece of role modeling you can do, particularly as they get a little bit older, where they're just going to see through any kind of yummy, isn't it delicious, right? And so you have to really think about how you depressurize food in the home and let just nature and taste and things develop.
I love the way you've put all that, because it's it's very natural. And I was laughing there because I can just picture me going, oh, look at this broccoli, isn't it lovely? I think my kid would move off the table and go and sit somewhere else if I did that. But I know, just to contextualize, I know, Claire, I know you're talking about kind of 2 to 4 year olds. It's a bit different in the context. I think the natural environment of eating together and being a good role model and, reoffering the food and saying, well, if you want it, it's here, it is good for you, but crack on and no pressure. I think that's it's a really nice way, and it really is the way it should be. But these interventions are in place because it's not the way that reality exists anymore.
Yeah.
The other thing around role modeling is mindfulness, right? Switch off the telly, right? When you eat, just eat. Don't do anything else. Just eat. Eat together. Talk together, right? Because sticking your kids in front of an iPad whilst they're eating is going to end badly in terms of that child's nutrition, not to mention their socializing skills and their vocabulary skills and lots of other benefits of coming together and eating together and positioning food with the preciousness that it has in our lives and in our families. That for me is role modeling, right? Lead by example.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think why Dan and I and the rest of both of our teams really enjoy working together and even just bouncing ideas off each other is that we sing from the same song sheet, but we experience different dimensions of that world, so Dan, exactly, he's talking about older children, he's talking about facing the challenges. In some ways, what we've done is we've gone, right, well, where's the easiest place to intervene? So we come from a position of finding opportunities for least resistance and trying to find small ways to encourage parents to make changes that can then result in good changes for those children. And Dan is talking about the day-to-day reality of food for families with those slightly older children and how absolutely challenging it can be. And I could not agree more wholeheartedly with him about the need for normality around food and normalizing all of these things. this app, VegStars, is there really to try to sow the seed with parents of young children on things they can do on one occasion, or actually really on an occasion every day for 2 to 3 weeks. But what we'd really want to see is that this translates into parents using these 3 different tools and techniques in organic ways that suit their needs across their parenting journey with their children, across that feeding journey, and to try and bring families back together in a harmonious way over food. And yeah, the more enjoyment we can all create, I think the better effects everyone would see.
You also say, Clare, I think the way to view this stage of child's development, if you're a parent or caregiver, is you need to equip them for the hurricane that's coming. The hurricane that's coming is the moment you go to primary school, what happens is your child comes out of the lovely bubble that you've created around them, and suddenly they're going to be influenced by their peers, they're going to be influenced by their teachers, they're going to be influenced by the media, much of which is very, very negative. Lots of advertising, lots of bad portrayal of food within films and things of that nature. And there's this overwhelming tidal wave of influence that we perhaps, I've got a 13-year-old, we're very aware of the influence happening to my 13-year-old, and our job is to equip him to deal with it. It's a very different kind of influence. But in some ways, there's similarities that you are preparing your child for primary school, you're preparing your child for the big outside world, and there will be a ton of negative influence, and you want to give your child as solid a foundation as possible to navigate that. And that's why, being proactive, getting something like this app, and really thinking about how you're going to plan and achieve the outcomes you want is an important part of preparing your child for life.
I love the way that you've both kind of reviewed and simplified the discussion that we've had. And it's been great talking to you all, because we've looked at the research, and I love that the powers that combine of the research that's coming out of Loughborough, the knowledge and enthusiasm of the advertising background that you have there, Dan. And I'm really excited to see where this app goes, because we at Loughborough are really pushing research and innovation, so the innovative approach of this app, but also collaborations and partnerships. So I think we can openly accept that we're not experts in advertising and marketing, but if we can utilize our research, create an app, and work with partners like yourselves to push it, then I'm sure the future's bright in this space. So I'm really pleased to have talked to you all. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this app goes and where this movement goes in the future.
Absolutely.
Good.
Thanks for listening to the Experts in Sport podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, then please contact me, Martin Foster, at m.foster@alborough.ac.uk. Thanks for listening. See you next time.